Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Keeping Current, the podcast from ERS and HVM designed to plug you into the world of electrical power systems. I'm your host, Joe Dwyer. I'm excited to kick off season 2 with a topic that has come to the top of minds for many people in facilities everywhere, addressing compliance, maintenance, and what it really takes to stay up to code regarding your electrical equipment. So whether you're an engineer, facility manager, or just interested in where the industry is headed, this season brings expert insights and suggestions that you will not want to miss. So joining us today, Warren Garber, a good friend of mine, who is a sales engineer at ERS. Warren and I have worked together for many years. In addition to a sales engineer, Warren is also a NETA Level 2 technician. So has a lot of background in doing shutdowns, doing maintenance on major equipment and electrical testing, and we're thankful to have him today. So get ready to unplug, relax, and connect, and welcome to Keeping Current. Warren, good afternoon.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon to you too.
Good. Well, happy to have you. Glad you can make it today. I know you're busy. And one of the things that we want to address, Warren, is specifically how testing has changed from the time when you and I were, starting in the field to now, and what are some of the changes that you've seen based upon compliance requirements?
Well, a lot of it has to do with safety, of course. When I started doing this back in the 90s, we were probably kind of under the attitude of just get it done. We still worked as safe as we could, but none of us really knew what NFPA was. And, we all knew OSHA was around, but, didn't really pay attention to a lot of it. We just kind of did the jobs that we had to do. The big change now is that everybody has been, our customers have been exposed to the safety, and all of the electricians that are working for us have been exposed to the safety. So it's a much, much safer environment for us all to work in.
So in your opinion, what's pushed it from a formerly being a best practice to now becoming an industry standard? Is it insurance? Is it OSHA? Is it cost? Where do you think are the reasons lie?
I think a lot of it has to do with safety again, and the push to get arc flash done in 70E. A lot of the things in 70E have pushed 70B to be required, because if you don't test the equipment and know that the equipment is up to snuff, it's not going to operate in the amount of time that it should operate in, which kind of throws all the calculations for the arc flash out.
Good point. So in your position as a sales engineer, it's obviously your one of your responsibilities is to provide advice and guidance to your clients. So how do you bridge that gap, explaining the value to your customers who see it just as another, oh gosh, I got some more stuff I got to do administrative wise? How do you cross that bridge?
Well, my main thing is I really like to educate my customers. And the first thing that I do when I walk into their facility is kind of look around and see, are there drawings on the walls? Are there stickers on the breakers? Do the equipment have stickers for inspections? If they don't, you kind of know that you're going to have to guide the customer a little bit more on the requirements and what needs to be done. And, have they actually tested the equipment? You really have to kind of feel what they're going to need from you as far as the program goes, and what they have done and what they need to be educated on.
Excellent point. Yeah, I feel that, not everybody has the, subject matter expertise that you have and such. And so I feel as part of our responsibilities, it's our job to help guide our clients. I couldn't agree more. So that leads me to my next question is, what trends or expectations have shifted in most recent years, and where do you see this going?
Well, I really see this being, as a total package, right? The electrical maintenance programs that customers have, a lot of them are lacking, and it's up to us as sales engineers to go into the facilities, figure out what the customers need, and be able to guide them and, push them in the right direction so that they can check all the boxes, right?
Yeah.
Some of them may have little pieces and parts of the program done correctly, but they may be lacking in, they may not have a person on site that actually knows the equipment well. They may not have, maybe the contractor came in and somebody decided to, paint over all the stickers, so you can't see when anything was inspected the last time. There's a, it really is up to us to steer them in the right direction and make sure that they're educated.
With the new 70B, one of the major factors of a successful 70B implementation is the electrical maintenance program, or the EMP, and then an EMP coordinator. So what are some of the factors, if you would, of who should that be, and what are some of the things that need to be involved in transferring the information from the 70B manual to a formal EMP program with addressing the compliance manager? How will that work?
Well, the compliance manager, first off, needs to know the equipment, right? They have to know the process, whether it's a manufacturing facility or, a warehouse. They have to know the facility's equipment, know the condition of the equipment, know how the switching should work. There's a lot of requirements for them. I think honestly, having that person in the facility, they have to have ownership of the equipment, right? They have to be the one that's assigned to it. I don't know that they necessarily need to be an engineer or need to be an electrician, but they have to have the facility, the know-how, of the facility itself. Mm-hmm. Are there special requirements? You know a little bit more about that than I do. Are there special requirements for that person?
No. I just wanted to, well, the way I view it, it's somebody who should at least understand the systems and understand, the schedule of maintenance, understanding what is a serviceable, limited service, and non-serviceable condition, things like that. And that's where I think having, and I want your opinion on this, we have a little bit of background in horsepower doing this. So do you think that clients having an external partner helping them bridge that gap is helpful, or are we just getting in the way?
No, I really do think an outside partner helping them with that is very, very beneficial for them. They don't have the time to,
right.
To really put 100% into it like it needs to have, or the expertise,
I have to agree because, when you're dealing with the principals we deal with, they're well experienced. But what the problem is, just like you said, they have a hard time. I mean, it takes an enormous amount of man hours to develop a program like this and implement it and manage it. So I think I have to agree with you 100%. Having somebody who has the background, who has the understanding of what it takes to develop that and then implement it from an outside perspective, I really think helps not only the client and the principals, but also the workers. Because what we want to establish to the working staff is, hey, we're not here to tell you how to do your job. What we're here to do is make sure you do it safe and you're in compliance with the new standard. That's really all we're here to do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, for sure.
What's the one thing? That's the one thing. That's the one question everybody says. What's the one thing you would do? But what's the one thing you would do on suggesting of how to make progress for the team to get started, and where should they begin?
I really think infrared scans are your foot in the door with this. An infrared scan done properly, that's the key. All panel covers need to be removed. Everything needs to be visually inspected. Everything needs to be thermally inspected. But at the same time, the technicians, when they're doing those inspections, if they open their eyes a little bit more and maybe document that there's, missing screws, or that the equipment maybe is not up to snuff. It's got some damage on the inside. I've been in many facilities where, you're condos are a big one for this, where you get into the room that's got all the equipment in it for the pool, and they are also storing all the chemicals in there, so you've got rusted panel covers, and it's just the overall condition. It's not just an infrared scan. So you're in the equipment, you're looking at everything, and then that way you can kind of get an overall idea of what kind of situation the electrical equipment's in, not just thermally, but also, real conditions. And that's the best. I think that's the best way to get to know the building, right?
Yeah,
and then you have an exit interview after the infrared scan's done, and have a talk with your customer over, those conditions, and that opens the door next to, well, maybe we should do an arc flash next, and then from the arc flash, well, we need to test the breakers and make sure that everything's working properly, because the arc flash is not going to be effective. So,
correct.
I think those are, the infrared scans usually the best way to get, and it's bang for the buck too, right? They get an infrared scan done for a couple $1,000, and on that they can bridge, okay, well, this is what maybe we didn't find a lot of thermal problems, but we may have a lot of mechanical issues, that we need to fix, so things like that.
Yeah, in my travels, I've seen, like, for instance, I was at a condo facility right on the beach on the Atlantic coast in Florida. And they literally had never exercised the main switch in like 57 years. Yep. And so they were wondering, like, well, can you guarantee that this is going to work? And I'm like, well, I can guarantee you that I'm going to have a plan B and C in case it doesn't work.
Because it's probably not.
It's educating your client and letting them know we're not magicians. We deal with, you get what you inspect, not what you expect.
Yes.
And so that's what I try to convey to my clients. A few more questions, because I know you're busy. What does success look like when an electrical maintenance program is done correctly? That's an open-ended question, but
that is an open-ended question, isn't it? Yeah. When they're done correctly, you have a safe environment for your workers to work in, also your outside contractors to work in. Mm-hmm. You decrease your liability, right? Because if you have all your ducks in a row, and if something, God forbid, something bad does happen in your building, because it can, the inspectors will come in, and insurance will come in, and you will be able to have all of your documentation in front of you to say, look, I've done my due diligence. I have tried to, cover myself, as best I can, but an accident still happens. So it mainly it's a efficient, safe environment, electrical system that works correctly. You really don't know it's there. That's exactly, that's the scariest part of this business. People could just sit back and just do nothing, and they're like, well, my system works, the breakers don't trip. Well, maybe they should. So
they never trip, no matter what I do.
Right.
Exactly.
The biggest one for me is, and my total pet peeve is just the single line drawings on the wall. For me, that is the safest thing to have, for me to be able to come into a building I've never been in and visually look on the wall and see, and I know how the system is wired, right? I know what is my means of disconnect. That is really what we're going after here is, a way for people to be able to work safely and a building to work the way it's supposed to.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things I stress when I'm teaching is, set yourself up for success. So to add to your, the single line on the wall under a piece of plastic, I always say, well, when's the only time you're going to really look at that drawing? And everybody says, well, when the power goes out. I said, well, what do you think we want above that single line drawing?
How about a light?
Every now and then I get somebody say an emergency light, and I shake their hand and say, God bless you. Great job. Yep. So, it's more like, And what are some of the other things we want in the switch room? We want a shepherd's hook. We want a
Hmm.
dielectric mat. We want some hearing protection. We'd like to maybe have
Flashlights.
additional PPE and things like that. That's a maintenance when electrical maintenance is done right. Because in addition to that, you got to work with your electrical contractor. You got to work with your testing company. And to add fruit to the 70B program, most of that is documentation. That's really what most of this is.
Hmm.
So if you have work orders that at your facility that says need to do quarterly maintenance, well, there's your documentation to test your transformers and things that you need a contractor to do. Well, your documentation is straight from the contractor.
Right. Nope.
So those are the things that help in that regard. So
Yeah.
a final piece of advice for teams to build or refine their EMP or looking to keep up to the standard. So I look at it as, this is like one big elephant, and nobody expects us to have this all done in a week. So my saying is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So
Right.
what's your approach to it?
Well, back to the infrared scans first, and
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and like I said, walking into the electrical room, and like you just pointed out too, a main electrical room can tell you a whole lot about the condition of a building, right?
Yes,
And the
sir.
condition of the people that take care of it, right? If it's
Hmm.
got a bunch of stuff on the floor and you can't find a shepherd's hook, that they all should have one, but sometimes they're stashed, back behind things. So,
Hmm.
it's I think that the best way for a facility to start this program, right? Let's say they haven't done anything, right? They need to start, and they know they need to start, and like you said, it's a huge, huge, huge thing that they need to accomplish. They
Right.
need to start off with an infrared scan. Then they need to figure out, breaker testing or even just breaker exercising, right?
Yep. Yep.
You should exercise main breakers, facility breakers, at least once a year, just to make sure that they open and close.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that they can do. The documentation, the safety training for their employees, and documentation of that. These are all small pieces that you can collect and put together in a big to put the big pieces in the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
But just break it into the small pieces and make it so that it's not that arduous for them to do. If it's a very large facility, you can split it up into sections,
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
and
Yep.
start with section A. And section A, we're going to get first, let's get some single line drawings done, or pull those old drawings out and see what still we can do and what we can't do. um, it's putting the little pieces together of each section, and then eventually building the whole thing together. Once you have this together, maintaining it on an annual basis or a quarterly basis, whichever way you want to do it, maintaining it's going to be easy,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
it's building it in the first place,
Yeah.
and it's really up to us as sales engineers to try and design the program and help our customers, educate them on what they need to do, and how they can, you need to show them how they can split it into the little parts, and let's do this first, let's do this next, and that way that they can put it all together, and then
Yeah.
eventually you're just helping them, with the
Yeah.
facility.
Excellent. Yeah. Good point. Yep. I couldn't agree more. And um, the we already have developed some programs for some clients, some 70 programs, and uh, we received great feedback. And what we did is just address in depth, what is required. And, that's how we, figured out that, a lot of this stuff is going to be, we already have, but what do we have to do? We have to put it under an umbrella or a program like the 70B. So we know that we're not going to miss a piece of gear. So we know we're not going to, do follow up on some findings on our infrared and such. So I couldn't agree with you more, Warren. I mean, and really, really do appreciate you being here today. And thanks so much for being with all of us today. And any final thoughts as we close out, Warren?
First, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll make time for you anytime, Joe.
All right, Warren.
I just really wanted to say, this is a very important topic. The changes that I've seen over the last 30 years as far as safety goes, and now, the driving factor to this is the fact that they're requiring these things to be done, which really should have been done a long time ago. And it's up to us to try and teach our customers what needs to be done and the proper ways of getting it done. And I have so many customers that are well, the last guy did the infrared scan in 4 hours and you're telling me it's going to take 3 days. And it's like, well, did he find any problems last time?
Nope.
Did he take any covers off? So
apples and oranges, and oranges.
And there's, that's another thing that they're saying in 70B, that the covers have to come off. I mean, they're saying that. So, I think this is a very important topic, and I was glad to take part with this with you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Warren. Ladies and gentlemen, Warren Garber. Thank you. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Keeping Current. If you found today's conversation insightful, please subscribe, leave a review, and be sure to tune in to every other Thursday for more expert insights. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn to stay in the loop and join the conversation at any time. We'd love to have you. And thanks for listening. And until next time, keep current.